Good evening. Welcome to another podcast of the Tennessee Thunder podcast brought to you by the Tennessee Freedom Coalition. I want to welcome everyone to our podcast and remind you that the mission here at the Tennessee Freedom Coalition is to promote small government, low taxes, little regulation, and sound money, something we can all appreciate. Welcome to our podcast. Tonight, we do have a very special guest. We're going to bring her on here in just a few minutes. Want to recognize our sponsors. We the People, the Trump Store in Pigeon Forge on Wares Valley in Freedom Plaza. Be sure to give them guys a visit or visit their website. And also Smoky Bear Shuttle. So if you're looking for a ride to Dollywood from the airport to the airport, Smoky Bear Shuttle is there for you to take you anywhere you want to go there. And I want to thank everyone for your participation in our day of prayer. That was a very big success, and hopefully we'll be able to have that again here in the near future. Well, without further ado, want to introduce our guest. We're going to bring her on here in just a second. I've been very excited about tonight. So Aundrea Gomez, she is a very special lady. She is the Tennessee director of Citizens for Renewing America. And she has spent nearly a decade as an elementary school teacher working with students from different cultures and languages in California and Tennessee. And in 2020, she found herself taking a stand against mandates in her school district, which ignited a passion for studying the Constitution and the principles of conservatism. Aundrea holds a master's degree in education, but believes that historical, biblical, and constitutional knowledge is the key to renewing our country and culture. Aundrea lives in Middle Tennessee with her husband and 2 children. And you can also find her on Twitter. She may have some other social media also at Aundrea Go. Aundrea Go. So we'll go ahead and bring her on now. Hello, Aundrea. How are you this evening?
Hi. Hi, Stephanie. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, how is it going? Or you're down in Nashville, aren't you? How's it
A
going down
little
there?
a little south of Nashville, about 35 miles or so south. Yeah, I'm in Williamson County.
Oh, okay, wonderful. So, how's it going over there? Tell us a little bit more about yourself, because I know we had this bio of you a while back. You may have added some things since. What's been your recent things going on in your?
Well, just busy working in the state of Tennessee, lots of travel. So my job as the Tennessee director with Citizens for Renewing America is to really build a network of America First grassroots citizens across the state, network and support and equip them in whatever America First fights that they are engaging in, and then also to equip them with what we're doing at the federal level.
Okay. Well, tell us what led you into politics. For those who did not see our first podcast months ago, what kind of got you into all this?
Well, I think I just became more interested in history and knowing, the foundation of our country. I would say, I would say about 17 or so years ago. My son was real young, and so it's interesting the things that change about you when you become a parent, and
Mhm.
sometimes your priorities shift a little bit. So I became a mom, and a cousin of mine actually had recommended I read the book Original Intent by David Barton, and so that really did kind of get me interested in politics a little bit. But I was a young mom. I ended up having a daughter shortly after. And so it wasn't a time for jumping into politics. That actually took place in 2020. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers can trace their activism back to 2020, when we recognized the mandates that were coming down from the federal government and even from our state and local governments um, to comply with mandates that were not law, and that we just weren't even being acknowledged for having rights of conscience or religious liberties. And so, as you mentioned, and there were mandates in my school system. And so the mask mandate I knew was wrong. I knew nobody had a right to force a mask on any child or any teacher. And so I decided to take a stand. And I knew that I was going to face consequences. And at the end of the day, I felt like the consequences of not taking a stand were worse than the consequences of taking a stand. So I chose to stop wearing my mask, and I was ultimately terminated for making that decision. So that ended my teaching career. And not just with that school system, but probably with any school system. I don't know that anyone was going to be interested in hiring a teacher who wasn't going to just follow the orders, just get in line and do what you're told. That's never really been my personality anyway, but so I had to really look outside of the box and what could I do with my education and my time and my talents that would be aligned with my personal mission and purpose for life. So I found Citizens for Renewing America, and it was a great match, a great fit, and I've been loving it for the last over 2 years now. So it's been awesome.
Fantastic. Well, for those who have been following you on social media, we have been seeing a lot of posts lately about election integrity. Tell us about what the Tennessee Fair Elections is all about and your work to ensure that we, the people, receive fair elections.
Okay. Yeah. So if you notice, most people are concerned about election integrity. And in 2022, it was in the fall, so still really new to the job, I was asked to work with Election Integrity Network because they were building out, that's Cleta Mitchell's organization, they were building out these state coalitions based off of a model that had been successful in Virginia. So the Virginia model. And so that became the framework for building state coalitions, and I was asked to get that started. So I did, knowing really very little about election integrity. What I am able to do is to pick up the phone and start making phone calls and find the people that know more than me. And so I did that. And so I have a board. There are 9 of us on the Tennessee Fair Elections board. And it's a wonderful arrangement because we all bring something different to the table, different knowledge and expertise, and from across the state. And then outside of the board, we have a coalition of citizens. We're not really an official organization. We are just really trying to connect citizens who want to work on election integrity. We're connecting with them on a weekly basis through a Zoom call, and we're equipping them with what needs to be done in their county, because that's where our elections take place, is right in your county, right up the road from you. So, what are the laws in Tennessee? What are the processes in Tennessee that should be followed? What are the vulnerabilities that we need to be addressing? And then we also have a group of our coalition that is focused on legislative solutions. So we're going into what, our 3rd year. So this fall will be in existence for about 2 years, and I feel like we're just really getting going. And we have a way of communicating now in social media, and it takes a while for things to kind of get off the ground and to get that momentum, and it really feels like we're getting that momentum now through the education and through the network that EIN has been able to provide as well, and all of their support.
How do you feel as far as the fairness on a scale of 1 to 10? Not to put you on the spot here, but how do you feel about fair elections in Tennessee as far as how much more how far do we have to go to get it more perfect as far as
Yes.
fairness?
Well, we need to always have eyes on our elections, because as long as there's people involved, there will be vulnerabilities. I would say that I think that the people that are involved in our elections, like at your county level, I think we have a lot of really good people at our county election commission. I think they want to do the right thing and they want free and fair elections, and they want to do a really good job. I don't know that they're always equipped to do the best job they can do by the state level. So I do really believe that we have some vulnerabilities. We go up against this idea that Tennessee doesn't have any problems and that we're number one in election integrity. And it's really unfortunate because it really depends on what are you really looking at. If you look just at a couple of our laws
Mhm.
in the state of Tennessee, it looks like we're doing pretty good, right? So we don't do ranked choice voting. That's a big, we should celebrate that. We do have voter ID in the state of Tennessee, and we don't have a mass mail in vote. Like we don't mail the ballots out just to anybody. We have a process to be followed. But out of those things, even within those things, there are some vulnerabilities. For example, our voter ID law is pretty old. It needs to be updated. We're noticing that we have some gaps in our processes for verifying and securing the vote for citizens only in our state. Um, and this is not just Tennessee, this is every state. We have the same problems, the same issues, and the same vulnerabilities that every other state has. We have a smaller population, and we do have some better laws. But for example, any um, any non-citizen can get a temporary license in the state of Tennessee. So, in order to get a true driver's license in Tennessee, you do have to prove that you are a citizen. That's great. But if a non citizen goes into the DMV, they can apply for a driver's license or an ID. And if they are not a citizen, they're going to get a temporary license. And it's going to have an X classification on there. That sounds like it's going to do the trick until you realize that when you go to the county election commissions, they have not been trained on how to look at that temporary ID and screen those people out as being ineligible to vote. So we've had people in our coalition go to their counties, go to their election commission and ask them. And the message that we are getting loud and clear is we haven't been given a process by the state, so we're not going to do it. We're asking them to put up the signs in the polling locations, even a sign that just tells what the law is, because it is in our constitution and it in our state constitution and it's in our state law that you have to be a citizen to vote. So that's the least controversial solution is post that sign in the polling place so people know, and we get pushback and the counties aren't going to do it because they don't feel they've been given the permission by the state to do it. So what does that mean? That means people can get a ballot and vote that are non-citizens. And do you know what happens when a non-citizen votes in a federal election? It makes them ineligible to be a citizen. It's a felony. So
Mm.
it's unfortunate that, we have an invasion at our southern border. We have an administration who is encouraging people to come into this country. We have an executive order from Biden in 2021. It was Executive Order 14019 that made any agency be a voter registration agency. So if someone comes across the border and seeks out any sort of services from the government, they're going to be invited to register to vote. So these people are getting on our voter rolls. And then if there's no proper process for making sure they have not been provided the ability to vote in an election, they will be voting in the elections. Once they cast that ballot, there's nothing you can do about it. So we do have some real vulnerabilities in the state that we can clean up. We have Many counties, I don't know about Union County, but in my county, we vote in a vote center. They've taken us out of our precincts and they've put us in these vote centers. Well, what does a vote center do? Well, first of all, it means that you're going all over the county. And so if you are go to a vote center, you can go to any vote center you want, and they're going to be able to provide any of the ballots for your county. So they have to have all of these ballots available. They can't do that with paper. What a mess that would be. So it necessitates them to have an e-poll book that's connected to the internet, and then, of course, your ballot marking device. So we now have all of these machines and technology because we're in a vote center. So that creates another vulnerability. You really can't do audits when you are in a vote center when you're out of your precinct. So there's a lot of things going on in Tennessee that need to be looked at and cleaned up. And we're tackling it. It's a big job. We definitely need more help. So if any of your viewers are not, they haven't found their issue or they're interested in being a part of election integrity, we'd love to have you. We need people in every single county to have their eyes and ears on what's going on and to be asking the questions and going to their meetings and building those relationships. And the second thing that we're doing, aside from all of that, is we are training poll watchers across the state, which is something that the Republican Party hasn't done in many, many, many years. And we're finding that in the counties, there isn't a systematic training process for poll watchers. They have it for poll workers. So, yay for the poll workers. We need more poll workers, but we don't have a process for poll watchers. And just having the poll watchers there really improves the whole process and makes sure everything's on the up and up.
Well, in our last election, we definitely needed some poll watchers. We had all kinds of funky things going on in our election. People turned away, polls closing early, all kinds of craziness, and hopefully that will improve this time. What is your feelings about the machines? I know that's been a big controversial topic, and a lot of people have suggested we need to go to paper ballots on election day and pretty much focus on that one day instead of having all these votes out here in the voting before the main election. What say you on that topic?
I would absolutely support going to a very secure hand-marked paper ballot. And yes, I would even support an election day rather than having 2 weeks of early voting. Um, the challenge with the machines is that we're never going to get into the machines. So while I agree that there are problems with the machines and we have seen those problems, I think we struggle to actually prove because they're never going to let us into the machines. Now, one of the, like I just mentioned, the vote center necessitates those machines and those e-poll books. One of the problems with the machines is, and we have a couple different types in the state of Tennessee, but the ballot, so in my county we have ES&S, right? And it's an unmarked ballot. It's just a plain piece of paper. So you don't have a way to go back and verify the number of ballots. Whereas like in the old school days, you had the book and you had to tear the ballot out. And at the end of the day, you had to make sure that the number of ballots and the spoiled ballots or whatever it all matched up. Well, now we just have stacks and stacks of blank paper. So there's a vulnerability right there. Next, the ballot, at least for ES&S, you make your selections on the screen and then it prints your selections out on the ballot. But when you go to put your ballot into the tabulator, it's not reading the names, it's reading a barcode. And that's a problem. I cannot verify that that barcode is casting the ballot, casting the names that I actually selected. So there's a problem there with the voter even being able to verify their own vote. So I see the problems with the machines. I think that the best way to go about the machine issue is to go back to the purity of the ballot box and returning back to precincts, smaller precincts, where you're in, neighborhoods where people know each other, and you've got a single ballot for that precinct, then there's no need for all of these electronics to be used. It really is a black box. None of us knows what's inside that black box, and none of us knows how to read barcode. So it's like there's so many steps removed between the voter and the vote that's actually being cast.
We have had several people tell us, and in the activism part of what we do in this last 2 weeks, about the dark money that was spent on the postcards. So a lot of these people that were getting these negative campaign ads against conservatives, true conservatives in our state legislature, and true conservatives that were running constitutionally, running for office. A lot of people said they were fooled that these little mailers looked very much, like they were legitimate. And so it made them question about, the conservative candidate. And we know now that a lot of dark money has been spent. I don't know if it's George Soros or who, but, a lot of dark money has been pouring in against these conservative candidates. And that, when these people go to early vote, they're like, well, I don't know if I like what I heard. And so they go ahead and vote, unfortunately, for the other candidate. This, in my opinion, has been a weakness with the early voting system for a long time, because these people that come in and try to influence these folks, they know they've got them in the early voting, and that could actually change the outcome of the election. So it's nice to hear someone that understands that as well, as far as the early voting goes and the dangers there. And this is something that, they played on as a convenience for the voter in trying to get them to feel all good and cushy about it. And a shiny object to say, oh, we want you all to vote, so we're going to make it so easy. And now it's being used for nefarious purposes, as we're seeing with the dark money. So is that
Yes.
kind of what you're seeing as far as what you know about this?
So
The-
it's interesting because I just saw a report yesterday that early voting numbers, percentages, were down across the state of Tennessee, with the exception of one county. And I don't remember off the top of my head what that one county was, but I thought that was very interesting. Unfortunately, I think it could be a result of people losing confidence in our
Mm,
elections.
mhm,
But you mentioned the dark money, the nonprofit NGOs. They are very much a part of the election process, and they are in Tennessee. You mentioned George Soros. Well, first of all, he himself is funding an army of poll watchers across the
mm,
country.
mm,
But his groups, through his Arabella network, they also establish all of these voter integrity groups, democracy groups, and so forth. There's so many of them out there, and they have these very benign sounding names, but they do a lot of work in the election integrity space. They go into our election commission offices, and they influence the election commission, the workers, the people that are running that office. They provide training, these
mm,
groups. They might provide training out in San Diego, California or something, and then invite these election commissions to come to their training. They sit on boards. They go to college campuses. They do voter registration drives. They collect the data of our students, and then they push out political messaging. They're grooming our college students through the data they're collecting and then pushing out that type of messaging. So we absolutely have all of these influences in the state. And then you mentioned the mailers with the individual elections. There's power and money, so it's going to corrupt. And it's so important for people to truly know what's going on. It's an inconvenience, but you've got to get to the meetings where you can get face to face and shake the hand of the candidates, where you can read about them and do a little bit of research before you make your selections, because otherwise we are going to be duped by who has the most money to pour into mailers. And the packs, there's so many packs, and they also have really nice sounding names to them. You think, oh, I can trust a pack that's got an America, first name, or a Liberty, or, whatever. They're just taking words and putting it on paper, but that's not necessarily like the behind the curtain, right? The Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. So we really have to be informed, and we have to really get engaged and even help on a campaign and help a candidate that you believe in.
Yeah, it's a big facade, and a lot of the groups that we run, we put some polling out there about these negative campaign flyers, and everybody that got on there, it was a mix. Some people said, "Oh, I don't believe that stuff," and then others said, "Oh, yeah, it was terrible what he did, or what he voted for, or she did or voted for." It was like they were just believing it hook, line, and sinker. And that's scary. I mean, that could actually, even a few percentage points could sway an election outcome just by the way that this early voting is done, coupled with the negative campaign mailers. So you're right, and they on the leftists, they certainly roll up their sleeves and get in there and work, and that's something that we want to see more of on the right. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's going to improve, and the sleeping giant has awoke.
Oh, I
um,
pray.
yes. It just takes time. And, I think we've been going through this probably a lot longer than a few decades. And, we think, oh, we'll just turn it around with an election or two, but it's going to take longer. This is a real battle. We're going to have to undo a whole lot of things that's been done to us, taking our freedom away. So as far as the rest of this year and into next year, what are your main focus items relative to what your organization does?
So we're a paradigm shifting organization. So one of the things that I focus on is getting some of our paradigm shifting ideas out into the grassroots. Um, and then this year and next year, I've had one of those paradigms was really getting the message out about weaponization of the FBI. So back in January of this year, I had our fellow Steve Friend. He is an FBI whistleblower, and I had him come to the state of Tennessee. And we traveled and visited some different groups across the state, and he told his story. It's a fascinating story. In fact, he's got a book on it, and he also does a podcast as well. So I'm not going to go through all of his story, but he talks about not only his story but also the main issues within the FBI. And so he did that several times, and we spent the whole week in the car driving and talking. And it became very clear to me we can't just go and tell people what all the problems are without actually having solutions. And he actually does give solutions, but I really wanted to take one of his solutions and run with it. And so we did just that, and it was kind of late in the game, so we were able to file a bill 15 minutes before the deadline. I was able to get my state rep and senator to file this bill and sponsor it, and it's a bill to thwart the FBI's weaponization in the state of Tennessee. So let me just kind of set the stage. So the FBI has about 14,000 agents, and that's to cover about 350 million citizens. Like, we're getting close to that number, right? So they really rely on local law enforcement to be able to carry out what they want to do. I think you and most of your viewers would have already recognized, if you're paying attention, that the FBI is weaponized against Christians, against conservatives, and so forth. In fact, they've given us a new acronym called AGAVE, and that stands for anti government, anti authority, violent extremist. And so when the FBI is short on their staff, they come into a county and they ask, let's just say, for example, the sheriff, the county sheriff who is elected, they ask if they can have a couple of his deputies to be on a joint terrorism task force because they need to do some investigating of terrorism in the county. Well, currently, that deputy can say yes or no, but if they say yes, or I'm sorry, that sheriff, if he says yes to having his deputies participate on that task force with the FBI, those deputies get a high level security clearance. They're no longer accountable to the elected county sheriff. They go off and they work cases with the FBI and they don't have to tell anybody what they're doing. So that really disempowers our elected county sheriff, who really should be our supreme constitutional law of the land, right? So not only that, we're paying for it. So your tax dollars are being spent for your county sheriffs to participate with the FBI on joint terrorism investigations. So they can, track moms who go to school board meetings or a grandma who goes and prays at an abortion clinic, right? So this legislation that we ran in this last session, and it failed, so we're going to have to bring it back, and I'll tell you why it failed in a moment if you want to know. It's kind of interesting. This legislation, what it does, all it does, is it empowers that county sheriff. If we're talking about the police office or the police force, then it would empower the chief of police who is nominated. So it empowers them because it says that if any of those officers are going to participate on a joint terrorism task force, the sheriff, the elected county sheriff, has to approve of each of those cases. So that means the power's back in his hands. He has to get the security clearance and he has to okay it. So if one of those cases happens to be people praying in an abortion clinic, he would be able to say, no, my guys are not participating in that investigation, and so on. So he gets the final authority. We can't just stop the FBI from coming into Tennessee. We can't, at the state level, we can't defund them. Trust me, I would love to see that happen. But this is what we can do to kind of draw a hedge of protection around the state of Tennessee and protect Tennesseans. So, like I mentioned, I had a very short on ramp this session. I did work pretty hard. I was surprised by the opposition. Um, so, our own Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, they were opposed to the bill. They testified against it. Department of Homeland Security from Tennessee also opposed. Even the Sheriff's Association was opposed. And what's interesting is that from what Steve has explained, that the FBI brings in some perks. They dangle a carrot to these county law enforcement agencies of we'll pay all your overtime.
Mm.
Or we'll provide some other resources. They always bring a carrot in. And so we have a little bit of an uphill climb. We had some good support in the House. I thought I had some support in the Senate, but ultimately it was the Senate that killed the bill. They just refused to hear it. They wouldn't even make a motion to hear the bill. I think some of them since then have seen that that was a mistake, and I think we're going to see more support in 2025. But that is one of my big goals for next year.
So the carrot, basically, aka a bribe, is what kept the bill from passing. Or I mean, not the bill from passing,
I
but
I think that was what influenced all of the opposition for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. And that, it really surprises me about the Sheriff's Association, that they would be opposed to it when they're basically depowering themselves. That's kind of shocking.
So individual county sheriffs were supportive,
Mm-hmm.
but the association it operates a little bit differently. So whenever you get associations of people together, you know what happens.
They're more like
Somehow it gets corrupted.
they're more like the lobbying group for sheriffs overall, kind of like a labor
Well,
union is,
but technically they're a C3 and they technically cannot lobby.
Oh, they do.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So, the other question I wanted to ask you, and you've mentioned some very disturbing things and things that we should all get on board as far as fighting for. Um, are there any other concerning things that you're seeing building up at this point that the public may not know about?
Well, I would say in general, and this isn't anything that is a secret, the corporate welfare in our state is an issue. For some reason in Tennessee, we like to hand out sacks of cash to corporations to come to Tennessee, and those sacks of cash are taxpayer dollars. Um, and we're bringing in corporations that are woke, that are promoting DEI principles. So that's a problem. Um, I think that it's a problem when the governor has an agenda and weaponizes his office to manipulate elections. Um, the governor's office runs their own legislation. I don't think that's good. That's definitely a conflict between the executive and the legislative branch. But in this election, the governor has been very active in influencing who's going to get elected, and that it that really waters down the vote of the people. The people need to be deciding. Now we need to be educated on it, and on the people that are on the ballot. But I, I just don't like that interference from the executive branch. It does seem to me, one of the things that people don't necessarily notice is, I hear a lot of people say, I want to work locally. I want to work in my county. I want to work on my school board or my county commission and all that. And I think that's fantastic because you can actually make a difference local. But what I think is missed sometimes is how much your local government is influenced by federal dollars. And at the end of the day, you don't have local control if you're taking money from the federal government, because that money from the federal government always comes with strings. There's always going to be a mandate behind it or something that you're going to have to do. Well, we have to do this because we took this grant. So while I think we are blessed when conservatives and Christians want to run for school board or county commission or whatever the local office is, it's fantastic and I applaud them for it. But if they're just going to go in there and just be a figurehead and not say no to the federal funding, then it doesn't matter. If all we can do is say, well, we've got 6 Christians on our school board, we've got a conservative school board, but if that conservative leaning school board keeps taking federal money, they will never have a conservative, they will never turn back the clock on what's being done to our kids. So even in your most rural counties, in your tiniest school systems, or your smallest little municipality, every single one is taking federal funding.
Yeah, that's a big concern. And like you said, the grassroots, this is where it's at. And we see a lot of that with our school system here in Union County. People that will go on the school board are elected, and we endorse several here, and we had a big tax increase, and it didn't seem to bother those school board members too much to to basically fund it largely, instead of right before a major recession, economic upheaval in our country. And they just seem to avoid the subject. And it's almost like you feel that the school board members are serving the school system more than the public, more than the taxpayer. And um, it's just really mind-boggling to me how that works. And same with the commission. They may be well intended when they go on the commission, but before you know it, the ones that were conservative allegedly are now on these committees, and they kind of like avoid you like the plague when you try to ask them a question or anything. So I see this as a huge problem. Tell me, and I know this wasn't something we had discussed, but how do you feel about declaring your party, or do you think that would even help when we do primaries
You mean as far as the school board races?
or any
We do,
races?
yeah, we do have the option. in the
Mhm.
state of Tennessee to declare party for those local races.
Oh,
It's
okay.
only been for, so in my county, um, I think it was the last, so we do odd numbers and then even
Mhm.
numbers in our county commission and our school
Mhm.
board. And so this last election for the even numbers, I think was the first race that people declared party. And now we're in the odds. I think it's helpful for the voter, but it's not necessarily a fix. You cannot guarantee that the letter behind someone's name means that they're going to be strong, that they're going to be conservative, that they're not going to be bought out. It's not a replacement for knowing the candidates. It just kind of gets your foot in the door, but you still have to do your due diligence and know those people and ask them questions. And then once they're elected, we have to partner with them. We have to come alongside them. We have to equip them, inform them, encourage them when they're doing a good job, embolden them to stand up and be strong and say, no, I'm going to vote no on that grant because that grant is going to tie the hands of the school board and force us to go along with what the government wants. Ultimately, governments always want to centralize all the power. And the federal government would love nothing more than to call all the shots in every classroom, in every school, in every county. And every time you take a dollar from them, that's what you're giving them the power to do.
What's your stance on educational freedom or choice, school choice? I know this has been very controversial, but what do you have any
Yeah.
viewpoints on that topic?
Well, first of all, I would say homeschooling your kids is the most patriotic thing you can do, especially if you're homeschooling your children through a biblical worldview. If you have any moms or dads or grandparents that are listening right now, I think they need to hear that this is the number one service that you can do for our country is pouring into the next generation and teaching them to love the Lord, to love their country and their community, and love their family. That's number one. We do have the freedom to do that today. In fact, you don't have to pass legislation to be able to homeschool or private school your child. You don't have to convince a legislator. You don't have to ask permission. We have this freedom today. I think I kind of already led on to how I feel about government funding. So I'll just leave it at that.
That's fine. That's fair enough. Now, what's your position on trying to get school superintendents put back in, if that could be changed? Do you think that would be helpful to school systems?
You mean elected?
Hmm.
Okay. So I have mixed feelings about this. I understand why people want them to be elected, because then that gives people a voice. My concern about that, and I'm open for discussion and debate about it. The first thing that comes to my mind is that if you're in a rural county and you are going to elect a superintendent, you are going to be limited to the people in your county, which means you may not be getting the best person for the job. I don't know. I just
Well,
think it might limit your search.
that's a valid concern. It's like here in Union County, we've had several, in my recent memory, I think the same person served for multiple terms for many years because really there was not anybody at that time that was qualified to do it.
Mm.
So you're right on that. It's a little bit concerning, especially in smaller counties where there's less choices. Um, so, as far as the corruption goes, do you think corruption is only a Democrat problem, or does it affect both parties? That's the prize question.
That's funny. It's a human problem.
Absolutely.
It's a human problem. If there's money and there's power to be grabbed, all of that corrupts. I think that, you mentioned this before that we are so far down the road. And I would even go as far as to say we are on a communist conveyor belt. We are fast tracking our way to pure communism in this country. And I already mentioned, the centralizing of control and decisions and all of that. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about communism, right? Is that power being shifted from we the people into a central authority. Um, I believe we the people are the solution to that problem. And what we have to be willing to look at is the reason why we have so much corruption in our government is because we've been abdicating our responsibilities. You mentioned convenience when it comes to elections. We tend to want convenience when it comes to everything in our lives. And that comfort and that convenience has gotten us to this place where we're so far removed from um, all of the decisions that are being made. The most important thing that I could say for getting our country back on track has to do with how we're educating the next generation, because this problem's been in the making for 100 years. It goes back to the original plan from Horace Mann and then passed on to John Dewey, which was to create this socialist system of education where the government had a captive audience of children that they could shape their minds. So we can't necessarily win a battle when the enemy is training the troops. We
And it's
just
amazing. We have schools named Horace Mann. That just kills me. How communism, socialism, and all the isms, globalism has been infiltrating our systems right before our eyes, even in our lives. I mean, even when we were small, I could now a lot of the things that I saw in school makes perfectly good sense. It wasn't as in your face as it is now, but there were just these little things that even as a child, before I knew anything about politics, when I reflect back now, I understand now what they were doing. And it's
yes.
amazing how you can, hindsight is 2020.
Well,
um,
you saw early stages of cancer,
hmm
and now we're in late stage cancer in our
right,
country.
exactly. Malignant. Um, so tell us a little bit about some conservative tools. We know that the liberals and the communists, all those folks that are fighting conservatism and conservative causes, we know they have had a huge arsenal to their disposal. What kind of conservative tools do we have to fight back and to take our country back?
So one I've already mentioned multiple times, and that is to homeschool.
Hmm.
So the number one currency for the government, and you mentioned like Agenda 2030 and globalism, all of that depends on the next generation.
Hmm.
So removing that currency out of the equation, not only are you getting your kids out and protecting your kids and rescuing them from all of that indoctrination, but you're
Hmm.
also affecting their budget and how many tax dollars they're going to get, and you're cutting off their data supply. People need to realize how valuable your own data is. So anything you can do to cut ties with, you know, providing any of those resources to the federal government is going to lead you to that self-governance that we were supposed to have from the beginning, right?
Hmm.
Um, I would say, as far as other conservative tools, I mean, that's like number one. I think number two, just being able to pick an issue that you're interested in and start at your local county level and just start going to a meeting, whether it's school board, county commission, whatever it might be, and start paying attention to who are these decision makers. Who are the players in the playing field? What are the issues? Making sure you know what the actual issues are from an America First perspective, not relying on cable news networks to tell you their side of an issue. You should know both sides. You need to know the opposing views, but so we have to improve our knowledge about the issues. But then we just really have to get out and get into what's going on, what are the decisions being made, and where can I divest from these strings that are binding us to these communist principles, essentially. Um, we do, through Citizens for Renewing America, have resources available. I do a training for grassroots activists to kind of get them going and get them, up and running. It's called our No Grow Go training. I do that on Zoom once a month. I'm available to do it in person as well. So we have that. We also have our weekly call that's on Thursdays, 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern. It's a 30-minute call that equips grassroots on what's really going on in DC. Where's the fight? How do we leverage this fight? How do we win it? um, and just really what's happening up there. And then we also have a lot of resources that help equip people on some of those paradigm shifting ideas that we were talking about earlier. So we have those types of resources. I think it's really important for people to be connected and meeting in person at the local level and meeting with, people like you and other patriot groups, whatever you want to call them, getting out and really knowing who your allies are, who your friends are. But at the end of the day, our leverage is in our voice, being willing to use your voice. So you got to know what you're talking about and you got to know who to talk to. Your vote is your leverage. Use it wisely. And your money is your leverage. Also use that wisely. And then I already mentioned your own children. It not their wonderful, beautiful gifts from God, but they are also leverage. Leverage that relationship by getting them away from the claws of the federal government whenever you possibly can.
Absolutely. And Andrea, I've had some people call me over the last few days, asking questions like, how do I know what are some vetting questions if someone is trying to kind of fill out a candidate that's running for school board? What are some of the questions you would ask if you were that citizen?
Uh-huh. So how do you define, what does education mean? If someone tells me that it's just to, make a child a good cog in the wheel, with job skills, that's not an attractive answer to me. I want to know if they understand social emotional learning and restorative justice and how those are being used in the classroom. I want to know if they know the history of education in our country. I want to know where they think rights come from. It's amazing how many people believe that your rights come from the government. And even the ones who say, oh, your rights come from God, they don't necessarily act out that principle when it comes to making decisions. Um, those are some of the basics that I can think of off the top of my head.
All right, Miss Andrea. Can you give us some information about your organization, how people can get involved with you at this point for activism training? I know we talked about that, but do you have like a website or some social media you want to
Yeah,
discuss?
so just for basic, I mean, you can go to social media and see that we are posting a lot of our primers and papers and like that, things like that are on our social media. So you can follow me. You mentioned my Twitter earlier is Aundrea Go. That's my Twitter handle, and that's AUNDREA. A lot of times people forget the U, so you got to put that in there. I am on Facebook. We'll see, that might be limited. Uh, you never know what could happen. Um, and so, but then our website is americarenewing.com. And that's where you can find more, you can learn more about FBI weaponization, or if you want to learn about tariffs, because President Trump is talking about universal tariffs a lot right now as part of his policy platform. So if you want to understand that from an America First perspective, we have, I think, 4 different papers on tariffs. If you want to know about more about what's going on at our southern border and how essentially the citizens of the United States are being replaced with these individuals coming across the border illegally. We have a great replacement primer on that. So lots of reading and information. I don't know if everyone likes to read as much as I do, but it's there. And then so that's our website. And then if someone wanted to get in touch with me specifically for the state of Tennessee, I would just suggest that they email me. So that's my first name, Aundrea, at citizensrenewingamerica.com. So if you're interested in the weekly call that we do on Thursdays for activists, if you're interested in our No Grow Go leadership training, any of those things, an email is probably the best way to get hold of me.
Wonderful. Well, we want to thank you, Aundrea, for joining us tonight. In closing, do you have any comments that you want to add to what we've discussed?
Oh, I feel like I gave you all a mouthful already, but I do appreciate that you invited me to be on, and I look forward to. We need to meet in person sometime, Stephanie. I need to make
Yes.
my way out there to your county, make a trip out to East Tennessee. So I do love to come and speak to groups. So if anyone's watching and you have a group in a part of the state, and maybe I've been to your group or maybe I haven't, whatever it is, if you'd like to have a speaker, I'd love to come and speak to your group and tell them a little bit about what we do, and I can give you a little menu of subjects to talk about. Um, so yeah, I love getting out. I'm a friend of I-40. I like stopping at Buc-ee's,
Like it
both
too.
coming and going. Yeah, and so any excuse to get on I-40 and make a trip to Buc-ee's, I'm happy.
And I think you're actually going to be at Freedom Fest. My understanding is in September. So
Yes. So me
maybe
and
you could,
Steve. Steve
I'm sorry.
Friend's gonna be there as well. My
Yeah.
friend, Steve Friend, he's gonna be there too. So
Oh,
that's gonna be great.
wonderful. Yeah, we had Tracy Smith on last week and we talked
Yeah.
about Freedom Fest. And so maybe we could tie in your trip with a meeting here in Union County, or maybe a mix of
Yeah.
different counties, and invite our parents and our community members. That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
That would be great. Let's talk about it.
And do the Buc-ee's while you're in town.
Yes.
All right, Miss Andrea. Well, thank you for taking time to share with our great patriots tonight and our members. And we look forward to seeing you down the road.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Stephanie.
Have a good night.
You too.
All right. Yeah, I want to thank Miss Aundrea Gomez. She's always wonderful to speak with, a great patriot, wonderful background. She brings a huge resource to us. And I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight, whether you're joining us live or you're joining us later after the podcast is over. We tend to get more watches after the podcast. So I wanted to mention one more thing before we close for the night. And that is that Jason Mills, his mother has passed away this week, and they are having receiving of the friends at Minet's on Thursday evening from, I believe it's 5 to 7, and then they have the funeral service following at 7 o'clock, and then they have the graveside on Friday. So you all are invited. I spoke with Jason today briefly about this and told him that we were holding him high in our thoughts and prayers. Be sure to reach out and talk with Jason. Very much appreciated this time. It's a very painful thing to go through, losing your mom like that. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that briefly before we close for the night. Again, visit our sponsors. Up in Pigeon Forge, we've got We the People, the Trump store on Wares Valley. They've got great merch for election season or for any time. Good patriotic stuff all year round. They also have a website, so be sure to check them out there. You can order your merch that way, or you can go visit the store. It's always fun to go into that store and just talk with other God-fearing patriot Americans. Also, visit Smoky Bear Shuttle when you're in Pigeon Forge, you're coming into town or going out of town. They're a shuttle service, and they are happy to they put smiles on miles. So great fun with those guys in transporting people to and fro. Anyway, we'll be back next Tuesday. I'm not exactly sure who my guest is going to be, but I'm sure I'll know here in the next few days. I've got several invites going out. It is going to be very busy. Even after the primaries, it's going to get more busier than ever. I also wanted to mention that we have an endorsement, and let me pull that up here real quick. Let's see. Sorry, I didn't have this prepared. So, where are we going? Okay. Pulling this up. Sorry about that. So we have our first endorsement of this year. And I hope I say this correctly. John Rewewing. He is running for county commission in Sevier County. And he is a constitutional conservative. We spoke today, finally got to meet up, and we vetted him. He is a constitutional conservative. John's campaign focuses on property tax reform, improving infrastructure, and supporting first responders. He's dedicated to community engagement, promising transparency and regular public meetings. His views on issues of national importance include strong border security, pro-life policies, Second Amendment rights, and American exceptionalism, all grounded in his conservative beliefs and faith. You can learn more about John at his website at www.johnrewewing.com, and that's JohnRulapauGh.com. Now, we have a post on our site about John. I think you will appreciate his stances. Was very honored to speak with him today, and we did endorse him. He actually reached out to us from another county. It's amazing that people don't do that in your own county, but people from other counties will reach out to us from time to time and say, hey, we'd like to be endorsed. He was very happy to have our endorsement, and he's actually out tonight at a dinner, and he was going to announce that. So I promised him I would announce the endorsement tonight. I don't have his little poster done, but we'll have that here in the next day, probably by tomorrow. So if you live in Sevier County, this is a great choice for you for that county commission seat. He said that county commission seat had been vacated, and he's running for that. I think he's running against 2 or 3 people, and he's the only conservative that's really put his stance out about his conservative values. So we value that. We think you will too if you live in Sevier County. Anyway, we will see you all next Tuesday night on the podcast, Tennessee Freedom Podcast. I hope to have a really good guest. We're trying to have some very good guests on our podcast, people that you will enjoy and take so much away with. Charles Cook, one of our associates, is having his training. I'm not sure if he has any seats left. I know they were going pretty fast in Marshtown. I'll try to get that information up this week, but he's having a big activism training in Marshtown, and everybody has been invited to that as well. And then we have Freedom Fest coming up. That's Miss Tracy Smith organizing that, along with other counties. Big lineup, a lot of good conservative people there and guests, keynotes. It's going to be a wonderful day, folks, and I'll have that information flying across our network here very soon. Y'all have a wonderful night. Again, keep Jason Mills and his family in your prayers, and we will see you on the next podcast. Good night, and God bless.